about Jayden Reed, and I also want to use this as an opportunity to plug the Beyond the Box Score show that Dan and I do. It's on FFT Express. You can find it on the YouTube channel on FFT Express. I've had some people tell me they don't know where to find it. They're like, I hear Adam talk about it, but I don't know where it's at. It's right here on YouTube. We do it every Thursday, and we had a great guest last week. It was Mike Wright of the Fantasy Footballers, and this week we have Nate Tice coming on. And Nate, I'm so excited for that one. I know Dan and I both. I don't know anybody who talks ball like he does.
He's amazing. He's fantastic. But can I just say something here? And Thomas, correct me if I'm wrong. So I went looking for the Mike Wright episode as well. So you go to youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. And if you click on the live tab, you'll see pretty much all of our videos. But I don't know if it's
not live. It's not a live show.
That one you're not gonna find the Thursday Beyond the Box Score in the live tab. Usually I click on live and then you'll see everything except for that. So you want to click on videos. Go to youtube.com/fantasyfootball today and then click on the videos tab. And then you'll see it clearly labeled Beyond the Box Score, which could be this one that you're listening to now, but you'll be able to tell the difference. So there will be multiple Beyond the Box Scores there. But that's why you may not be able to find it, because if you hit live, you will not find it. Please hit videos at youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, so we talked about some rest of season outlooks last week, and one of the guys I brought up was Jayden Reed. I was curious what they thought about him. I had a wide receiver 10 going into the week rest of season, and I got a lot of pushback that was too low. And Mike was like, I think that's totally fine. It might even be too high. He's like, I think it's important to remember that week one really influenced all of this per route, per target data that we look at with Jayden Reed, because he put up such crazy numbers in a game where there were weird field conditions. And so if you remove week one, we're getting a bit Azer steady here. If you remove week one, his per route data really doesn't look nearly as good. And I use per route data rather than just raw data because, of course, the Malik Willis games affect things for total numbers. But 21% target per route run rate since week 2, 7% first down per route run. Those rank 37th and 43rd among receivers. 2 yards per route run, that ranks 22nd among receivers. Just thought it was interesting. His role hasn't really changed at all. Romeo Doubs led the Packers in targets this week, and when Doubs is in the field this year, he leads the Packers in targets. Doubs does. So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on Reed. Do you think maybe we got a little bit too excited with him? I know, Adam, you brought up when we've talked about in the past that there really haven't been any highly productive receivers who run as high of a percentage of their routes from the slot as he does.
Mm-hmm. No, and he's got an interesting profile because I don't love the slot rate, but he is someone that, unlike other players that like a Tyler Boyd in the past, I had mentioned as a guy who's been successful, but with that kind of a slot rate. But, you know, unlike a guy like Wan'Dale Robinson, they will throw the ball downfield to Jayden Reed. So I will say, I think I said it yesterday, the Packers are one of those teams that you start Reed. I guess the difference is like, the difference between the Packers and the Niners is you're basically starting Debo, Ayuk, and Kittle every week before the injury and expecting one of them to stink. Your only guy that you're actually starting is Jayden Reed on a weekly basis. And there are going to be weeks where he stinks. Just not enough target volume. They spread the ball out too much. You just have to deal with that. There aren't that many wide receivers where it's like you never, ever expect them to struggle.
Right.
Reed is going to have some down weeks, but he's so good and so talented that I still think he's a must-start guy. Probably not top 10, though.
I'm with Adam on this. I missed him this preseason because of some of the rates that we just discussed and some of the concepts we just kind of hinted at, Jacob, where like, look, is he going to play a lot, you know, and are the targets going to be there? But he's enough of a big playmaker. And I remember being wrong about him watching his before I watched his tape. I was like, I don't understand why this guy's being talked about as an interesting prospect in the class. And Nick, my co-host on Big Benter, is like, go watch his tape at Michigan State and you'll see it, because he doesn't have that 40 time. He's not huge, but he's a really good route runner. And so I think the key that you mentioned, Adam, is that he can also win on the vertical plane, and that's where some of the big plays could come from. But like you said, the reality situation is the targets may not be there every week, but in today's landscape in fantasy, how many, every week receivers do we even have? Like you said, Adam.
All right. I've got one more question for you guys. This is Giants specific, and then we'll get on to the regular, scheduled programming, talking about Brian Thomas Jr. and Erick All and everything. What do you think about the running back split? Because we saw 67% snap rates for Tyrone Tracy. Do you think that's just easing Singletary in?
I don't think it's just easing Singletary in, because I feel like Singletary was ready to go, healthy for this game. I think some of it was game script dependent with the Giants falling behind by so much so early. Tracy is, like you said, Jacob, one of their passing out backs. Now, Tracy did miss a blitz pickup in this game, which is I'm not going to hold him accountable for that and say like that's it because it's one play, but it's just something to keep an eye on as they move forward. He's going to have to be good in pass protection, but I think it's clear that they realize he's one of their playmakers and he has to be on the field. I would think it's going to be at least a 50-50 split moving forward.
And Dan, I talked about Malik Neighbors yesterday, but I want to get your thoughts because I don't want to overreact, but you and I were very nervous about the Andrew Thomas situation. Is it going to be this bad? What do you think?
It's a great topic to get on because he's one of the most important players in fantasy football. And I want to give you credit. All week you said, I've seen it, I've watched it, I know it. And the Giants without Andrew Thomas is a much bigger problem than people realize. Not every team has this issue, but a team like the Giants who have Josh Azudu as their next tackle, it becomes a major problem because Azudu can't pass protect, and they used a player to chip almost every single down. And what that does is it takes one player fewer in the route, which allows one fewer clear out route and more eyes and attention on Malik Neighbors, for example. The biggest issue I see is still not that, though. Like, it's still just the quarterback, but ultimately they're going to be limited taking those deep shots, which Neighbors did make some plays on in the early half. A lot of his plays were after the catch, but there's not going to be as much space to go after the catch. And this was the nightmare we all were worried about in the preseason. Like, are they going to be so dysfunctional that Malik Neighbors will not be a weekly player? So I am a bit worried about it. But I don't think we're going to see it. A lot's going to change. I don't think Daniel Jones has many more starts in him. I think this will probably be his last game of the season against the Steelers. So it's going to change a lot once Locke gets in there. So I think we need to just wait this one out a little bit.
Yeah, he might struggle this week at Pittsburgh. Then the schedule is so much better for Neighbors. And I think Dan would also, we can just wrap on this. Also, you can back me up here. The right side of the Giants offensive line was terrible yesterday. And they actually have been pretty good. So I think
regression game for Illuminor and for Greg Van Roten, their right tackle, right guard. That's the issue too, Adam, because some suggested we'll move Illuminor to left tackle to fix it. That's not going to fix the issue.
Right. But I would say they'll probably play better than they did yesterday. All right. Sure. Jacob, back to you, sir.
All right. Brian Thomas Jr. again led the Jaguars in routes run. That is exciting. That's back-to-back weeks. I thought that might not happen until later in the season, but it's already here. I also wanted to highlight Trevor Lawrence. He's getting the ball up much, much quicker. Average time to throw in the last 3 games is 2.4, 2.6, 2.37 seconds. It was at 2.8 before those games. He also has a much, much lower average or off-target rate. It's at 6% or lower in each of the past 3 games after being double digits in each of the first 4 games. So we're seeing shorter, quicker passing, more targets to Brian Thomas Jr. I think Evan Ingram being back helps as well. And, one of those matches was against the Colts, but he also had Bears on the road, and I thought played reasonably well in that game, and then pretty well against the Patriots. So I'm I don't know, cautiously optimistic about this passing offense going forward. The schedule in the second half is really rough. So I did rest of season rankings last week, and I had Brian Thomas Jr. at like wide receiver 30 or something. And people are like, what? You've been telling me all year that he's, and it's like, yeah, man, it's rough. But at the same time, he won against Christian Gonzalez, so maybe it just doesn't matter.
You really wide receiver 30? I can't believe that.
I was shocked. I missed that. I can't believe that either.
Yeah,
it was probably too low, but I also have very little faith in the offense and the coaching and every single thing around Brian Thomas Jr. and his offensive environment.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we'll see. It's just, I don't know. It's a lot to ask a rookie receiver to just completely be the driving force behind an entire offense.
Fair.
Yeah. All right, I'm pretty excited about him though, and the Bears game was in London, but it's still roadish game. But the Bears are just so good against wide receivers, even though they were missing 2 starters. They are so good against wide receivers, so I would give Thomas a pass on that one.
Yeah, Jalen Johnson's a stud for sure. Tank Bigsby, I wanted to bring him up. He had a 66% snap rate, 74% of the running back rushes. When it was in the red zone, those numbers only went up. But I think this is really game script dependent. I think he's probably the most clear sell in fantasy football. Yeah. When the Jaguars can control a game on the ground, he's probably going to have a good game. But the next 4 games are the Packers, Eagles, Chiefs, and Lions.
Great point.
Right? Like, they're almost definitely going to be losing in those games.
Can't see him having any impact. That's a great point. I mean, unless he has a big run again, he's going to be a tough start in any of those.
Yeah. All right.
The passing game. So, yeah.
Yeah. Let's keep it rolling. Good vibes here. Sam LaPorta. target share by game.
Good vibes.
No, it's terrible. 18%, 6%. This is target share by game. Sam LaPorta. 18%, 6%, 9%, 21%, 4%, 8%. So he's
Can
been
I ask you a
below.
question, both of you, real quick about this? I haven't had a chance to watch his tape. I don't know if you have, Jacob, or you, Adam.
No.
Is it possible that he's not being as utilized in the offense because he's not fully healthy?
That's interesting. I'll look into like some of the. I'll probably write about him this week on the In the Lab on Friday. I
Okay.
do think his separation stuff has looked worse than the year before, but still middle of the pack, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
below.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Below 10% in 4 of 6 games. Last year, he was above 10% in 16 of 17 games. I think it's mostly just that he's just not part of the offense, really. This was even a game where Jameson Williams was not targeted.
Right.
Jameson Williams is 4 games in a row.
Yeah.
How many does Jameson Williams have? 12 targets in his last 4 games? I think it might be 11.
He's a tough start, but he's so good when he gets the ball. It's like one play could change a week, but he's a tough start.
Yeah,
it's amazing. Amon-Ra is like right there at like 30% target share, even with all these other guys. Like he's just an alpha.
So good.
It's 10 targets in his last 4 games for Jameson Williams.
Wow.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a really random note. We don't know what's going to happen with the Browns. If it's Dorian Thompson-Robinson, then that's probably a problem, and none of the receivers are going to be that relevant. But Cedric Tillman, round 3 pick last year, he was thought of as like kind of a project receiver. He's shown some encouraging signs, but overall hasn't done hardly anything. But in the first game with Amari Cooper, he was second on the team in routes, ahead of Elijah Moore, 12 targets, 127 air yards, first on the team in receiving yards with 81 receiving yards. So maybe a name to know. Definitely a guy you should have picked up in Dynasty last week and pick him up this week if he's still out there. Erick All finally ran more routes than Mike Gesicki, first time all year. Didn't do anything. But if you believe in this Bengals offense and how well Joe Burrow's been playing, then I think he's looking like somebody who might be a league winner, whether it was just ACL was the reason they're easing him in or just because he's young. I don't know, but it seems like he's working his way in where he's like going to be close to a full-time player by the end of the year is my guess. Joe Mixon had 63% of the offensive touches and 54% of the Texans' scrimmage yards this week. Alvin Kamara is the only other player to hit both marks. It's bad in Houston right now. They really, really need Nico Collins back. The offense just looks broken. They've been asking Stroud to just do it, just be kind of hero ball. And then this week that totally fell apart. And so they're just like, I guess Joe Mixon go do it. Like, I don't know. We don't have any answers. Did you guys watch that game?
I actually did.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Dan.
No, you go first, Adam. I know.
I watched. So I wanted to see if Jair Alexander, because they got into the fight pregame. I wanted to see if Jair Alexander shadowed Stephon Diggs, and he didn't. And then I just started watching all of their snaps. And the biggest issue to me was pass protection. I believe CJ Stroud was pressured second or third most highest rate this past week.
51%. And this Packers defense has been like very bottom of the league in pressure going into this game.
Yeah. So their offensive line is really not playing well enough right now. I didn't really look like closely enough to see if there was a lot of separation because the plays were just blown up. So it's obviously, I think it's just a Nico Collins thing. Like you said, when he gets back, it just changes everything. But also, I said this on one of our shows last week. At what point in this season or next off season are we going to hear Tank Dell say, well, yeah, you know what? I'm just finally 100% back from my broken leg, right? Like the guy is doing nothing explosive, nothing downfield.
Like Pollard last year, the same injury, right?
Exactly. No, Pollard, I think was an ankle, maybe the same injury.
Pollard had the same injury, yeah.
Same concept. Oh, was the same injury? Okay, same concept, right? It's like, you get all these reports going into the season. He's 100%. He's 100%. And maybe he is. I don't know. But then mid-season, there was this bombshell in the fantasy community drop. Tony Pollard, not 100% healthy, hasn't been all year. It's like, oh, of course. Well, that's why he's been so bad. So I'm wondering if that's the issue with Tank Dell. And yeah, they have no explosive players with Nico out and this version of Tank Dell.
One thing I want to add in is just as good as CJ Stroud is, and I think anyone who watches this can see the way he manipulates a pocket, the arm talent, the ball placement, the anticipation, the velocity. It does happen for a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL, no matter who you are, where once you get into that year 2 and defense coordinators have what they say is about between 8 and 12 games on film, they can start, if you're, especially in the same system, they can start taking away some of the concepts that worked for you. And I read in a crazy stat, I think it was from you, Jacob, and you can confirm if this was from you with the actual stat in a second, but the Packers destroyed the Texans' game plan and everything they want to do on offense without blitzing at all. They didn't send extra rushers, and yet they pressured Stroud the entire game. That shows issues with the pass protection, but it also shows issues with the scheme, in my opinion, because it shows that some of these were coverage sacks or coverage incompletions or just issues within the route concepts, issues within what the Texans want to do and how the Packers are tuned in to what the Texans are running from a route combination standpoint. I have to watch the tape to confirm that. I saw that game live, did not watch the tape on it. So we'll see. But I think there's obviously an issue with the Texans passing game once Nico's not in the game.